Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. I'm gonna stand here behind the. I normally wander around the stage, but you're my third stop of the week in time zone ping pong to give three firsts. In the beginning of the week, we had the World Egg Expo in California, in Tulare, that has 100,000 visitors from 60 countries, who for the first time in its 53-year career brought hemp to the show, and it was the belle of the ball. And so we started the week there with that. I went to Purdue University in the middle of that. Purdue, from a very conservative Midwestern state who is looking for ways to support their farmers as well, has now gotten into the research of this plant and just been a great partner for us as well. So you're the third stop. So 3 time zones, 2 countries, and I couldn't be happier to be here and tell you about the hemp and really the state of the union of hemp in the United States. As was mentioned, I grew up on a farm in eastern Colorado. I've been an advocate of this plant for 20 years. I learned about the plant while sitting around a campfire in Zimbabwe 20 years ago when I was doing work with Holistic Management International on soil, building soil carbon. So it's been a passion for me. I got interested first, mostly because of a social justice issue. I was raised Catholic, and what my faith gave me was really the social justice side of the faith. And as I learned that evening around the campfire what was happening in India, where farmers who had grown hemp for a very long time were being forced by their government, coerced by their government, to transition to cotton, GMO cotton. And for the first time in the lives and the generations of those farmers, they were being forced to use chemicals and borrow money for inputs, and finding, much like we do here in the United States often, that once they did that, they weren't making any money either. So in that culture, there's the killing. There was a lot of suicides happening amongst those farmers, and they were doing it by drinking the pesticide they were being forced to put on their land and their crop. So for me, that was the launching point for me about a coercion by the government to affect the lives of these farmers, and that there's estimates now that there's something near 250,000 of them that have committed suicide on this issue. But as I got to dive into the plant and understand the plant and its properties and what it could do for us, again in America, and then really fully understanding what happened in 1937 and then again in 1970, it again awoken the warrior inside me about how are we going to fix this. Now the war on drugs in the United States, when we talk about cannabis and hemp in particular, are bookended by really 2 major events. August 2nd, 1937, FDR signed the Marijuana Tax Act. Now that was really pushed and promoted in large part by DuPont, Hearst, and Rockefeller. And let's make no mistake about it, that campaign was rooted in racism, pure and simple. But it passed, and we began the end and the demise of our industry at that point in time. It killed it, and farmers then started moving on to other crops. If you fast forward just 4 or 5 years, at the beginning of World War II, our government soon discovered that they couldn't, that they were really reliant on the hemp rope that we used to grow in the United States, and that it was, and since the 37 Tax Act had been supplied through the Philippines, and the Japanese understood where our supply line was, and they blockaded it. So all of a sudden, our military, who used a lot of hemp fiber for rope and for parachutes and for canvas and for uniforms, found itself without any good options. So Hemp for Victory was born. It was born in the Congress, and it was funded by Congress through a War Hemp Industries Corporation shell that was funded by them. And over the next 2 years, they planted seed, multiplied it. In fact, in 1942, they gave every 4-H club in Kentucky enough seed to plant 2 acres for multiplication for the next year's efforts, so that they could plant hopefully 300,000 plus acres in the Midwest. So keep in mind, just 5 years prior, we've been told this is a dangerous drug, a dangerous plant, and now it became so important to our national security that 4-H kids were growing it. So they went through the Hemp for Victory campaign. Congress allocated a lot of money to this. The farmers started growing again. We had supply chains for the military. We had planned to develop 43. We actually only developed 42 processing plants in the Midwest. But then when World War II ended, the support for the industry ended once again as well, and we rolled it up over the objections of farmers and everybody that had really participated in the effort. So once again, we're on, we're off. So with the exception of a couple of small plants that continued to operate in Wisconsin up until 1958, the industry was dead. So you enter. So I'm gonna park there right in a minute because I want to end with the Nixon part of the war on drugs part. But I'll go back to the very beginning of this plant now. Keep in mind, this isn't a new plant. It's only new to us, and only new because of what we've done in the United States over the last 80 years, and what we've done with public policy around the world to conform with our expectations of the prohibition. So if you go back to the Chinese culture, the Great Wall of China has hemp fiber in the bricks. In Egypt, the bricks of the excuse me. The bricks of the pyramids contain those as well. In the Old Testament of the Bible, the recipe for holy anointing oils includes cannabis oil. If you fast forward then to Columbus and the sails that powered his ships, those were canvas sheets made from the cannabis plant, the hemp plant. And in the founding of our country, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, both founding fathers, grew hemp on their plantations. And in fact, if you were a farmer in the colonial days and had more than 10 acres of land, you were required to plant 10% of that land to hemp, or you could be jailed and fined. So it became a very integral part. If you fast forward to 1862, the census indicated that we had about 16 million acres of the plant growing generally in the southeast. So once again, to circle back, this isn't a new crop. This isn't new to anybody, but except the drug warriors that emerged and starting in that fateful day in 1937, and then brought us to 1969 and 1970 when Richard Nixon created the Controlled Substances Act. Now, on that act, there are different schedules for drugs. Schedule 1 is reserved for the most dangerous of drugs in the United States. They have to have no known medical benefit, a high propensity for addiction, and those are the two main precursors for that. So we know that both of those are false. In fact, at the same time that this was happening, our government owns a patent on the neuroprotectants for our brain that is held by NIH. So once again, we found ourselves in a very perplexing position because Nixon had taken this really valuable agricultural crop and called it a drug. Now, we just had a lot of Nixon's notes released over the last year. After the 50-year time frame, they're declassified. And there are notes in there from John Ehrlichman, who said, and I quote, "Did we know that this was not a drug? Sure we did. This was about disrupting anti-war people and the black and the Latino communities, of which Richard Nixon had a real disdain for." So again, the racism that propelled this in 1937 and then again in 1970 with Richard Nixon gave us the last 50 years where our farmers did not have the ability to grow a plant. As after 1997, we were the only G7 nation that didn't allow it to be grown in some fashion. And so we were, and then because it was combined on the Schedule 1 with marijuana as well, we've had disastrous results on that from how we've disrupted those communities and the lives and the incarceration rates that come along with that. So as we went through 1970 really to 2005, there was a real hammer from the federal government on anybody trying to grow this crop. And so it literally did take a standstill at that time. But when you get to about the 2006-07 time frame, there was a small group of very conservative farmers in North Dakota who decided they wanted to grow. And they started legal action in the federal courts to try to get a permit. Of course, it was circular logic by the courts. The court said you need to go back to Congress. Congress would say you need to go back to the courts. Those efforts died. But what that did was really help kind of wake up a group of advocates on the agricultural side as well to pair up with the consumer advocates that have been there all along wanting the products. And then in 2007 2006, I was able to start a really intensive education campaign in Colorado, where once a quarter we went and we did education to the Bar Association, to the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, to the legislators, to the Sheriff's Association, to the local police. Anybody who would listen to us on a quarterly basis, hosted by the Canadian Consulate, we were able to take a 4-year period and with some really intense education and move the needle far enough in Colorado that we could get a resolution from our legislature that was passed unanimously, by the way, R&D 100% buy-in on this, to return industrial hemp back to America's farms. 2 years later, we put Amendment 64 on the ballot. Amendment 64 was Colorado's landmark ballot that ended prohibition in its entirety of the plant, both for industrial hemp all the way through adult use. And we became then the first unit of government in the world to do so. So that was the first domino to fall. I've done a lot of work in public policy on renewable energy and agricultural issues, and generally if you're trying to change federal policy, and believe me, this was a big lift. We were just trying to change many smaller things before, that you needed a bottoms-up approach and a top-down approach. You needed a hammer and a lot of people in a grassroots fashion supporting you. So what we did was we started bringing all our work that we did in Colorado to different states, and by June of 2013, we had 13 states on the board who had then legalized hemp in the footsteps of Colorado. And in that year, we were working on the Farm Bill. We get every 5 years, we have a Farm Bill in this country. Very tough to get any substantive change in that, but we knew that there was just a small window of time where we might crack the door open just a little bit. So that's what we did. I wrote some language in June of 13 that became known as Section 7606 of the 2014 Farm Bill. And what that legislation did was make it a states' rights issue. So if you were in a state where it was legal and you had a permit system and oversight by the Department of Agriculture, you could allow your farmers to grow. So the horse was out of the barn. Now, the interesting thing that really happened that week, in addition to getting that passed quietly in the middle of the night, late the night of June 19th, 2013, was we'd had a U.S. flag made from industrial hemp fiber, regulation size, just like you'd see flying anywhere, for Congressman Jared Polis to have in his hand when he was arguing the amendment on the floor of the House. After that was done, we were just 2 weeks away from July 4th. And so when we finished up that night, we knew that the language was going to survive. I decided we would try to get that flag flown over the Capitol on July 4th as a coup, a bit of a coup, to stake our claim about we're here, we're serious, we're not going anywhere. And so we were able to get the Capitol Architect's Office to work with us, and on the morning of July 4th, the story broke that there was an industrial hemp flag flying over the Capitol. And 5 months later, the administrator of the DEA at that time, Michelle Leonhardt, was with a group of the National Association of Sheriffs, and in her opening speech to them that fall, said that when she woke up that morning of July 4th and read that there was a hemp flag flying over the Capitol, it was the worst day of her 33-year career at DEA. She said, "I'm against all illegal drugs, even the flag-making kind." Now, that was a great story for us. But I really share that really to show you the kind of bureaucratic and regulatory inertia that's built into the entire war on drugs, and especially in the cannabis versus hemp space as well. So we had really cracked the door open. That language ended up in the conference committee later that year, and by January of 2014, we had law. And so we were out of the gate. So in 2014, we ended up with I think there was about 37 states in 14 that had legalized, and we eventually got to 48. But we went from 0 acres in 2014 to last year 511,000 acres permitted. Now that was permitted acres. We didn't harvest that many, and nor did we plant that much. But it gives you a sense of just what the support for this plant is out there, and who's willing to try it, and who's willing to start looking at ways we can make and create new opportunities. So we really feel like with that, then in 2018, the most recent Farm Bill, we did a full descheduling. It literally took hemp off of the Controlled Substances Act, Schedule 1, removed it from DEA's purview, and took it to USDA and reclassified it as an agricultural crop. Now you can imagine there's a lot of consternation in the bureaucracy about this from that side, because for 80 years they've been telling the story, telling the lie about what this is and what it isn't, and now it's an agricultural crop. Now we've got a lot of work ahead of us yet. We still have to get a good insurance programs in place. We have to get markets in place. Our infrastructure was decimated because of the acts of government over time to purposely shut those down. But we see a real opportunity in agriculture right now to build a new industry and participate in a global marketplace that's going to give us products that we can take to consumers and build new opportunities in the United States. And hopefully, as we try to move away from a centralized agricultural system and help develop and support the many groups that are out there trying to decentralize the food supply, both for the benefits that it gives us at our local level, and just for national security, food security as well. We think the hemp is the plant to do that. To that end, we formed First Crop last year, 5 of us that have been working on this issue for a long time, Public Benefit Corporation, that is working with small farmers from Santa Fe north along the Rio Grande River for about 150 miles, and trying to build a model that will work, an economic model for them so that they can compete in the marketplace as well. What we have right now is we have these emerging small markets, and we have a few of the big players right now that got in early, spent a lot of money, assuming that the markets that we had over the last 2 or 3 years might last for another 2 or 3 years. And they're in a real pinch right now. We overgrew the supply last year. But long term, I'm really bullish on this plant, and really again how we can take a leadership position and help use our 21st century research and our tools to make that happen, and really just and use that as another step to get the government out of the way. We're not seeking subsidies. We're not seeking support like many of the other crops are. We believe that we can stand on our own. We believe this is our opportunity to shine and show that can take place. So what we're going to see over the next 2 to 4 years is and a lot of rulemaking. Under the 2018 bill, USDA was directed to create interim final rules for a national standard. It's copied much after the post-prohibition on alcohol. These became state issues. The federal government set a kind of a standard that everybody had to meet. You could be more stringent, but not less. And so what we're going through right now is a process of states trying to determine whether they want to create a state plan to conform with the proposed government plan, which is a little complicated, particularly for new growers, or whether, and then under the law, they can stay under the old law for yet another year while we try to sort out some of these changes. So we're really on the crux of something big. It just as an example, this plant is food, feed, fuel, fiber, pharma. This plant claims to have 25,000 known uses. I don't doubt it. I've never counted them up. But a very versatile plant. And say that almost any problem we want to tackle and look at, whether it's creating a new product or solving a problem, the hemp plant will have a role in there somewhere. But we see some real opportunities in displacing soy in animal feed for those who want a more natural meat, and that on the other end of the scale from the vegans, that they want to support a practice that regenerates the soil and doesn't use modified organisms. They'll have an ability to do that. The fiber, globally, we have a $750 billion fiber market, and there's a real move again within that sphere to do natural fiber and for the fiber to have its story. Many of the advocates today, they want to wear or eat their advocacy, regardless of where you are. You want to support what you do. And so we believe that just capturing a small amount of that global market that's coming generally out of the millennial space and is moving a lot of these markets is going to give us an opportunity to bring at the very least some niche markets in and fiber back to the United States and create jobs in our rural communities. We have not done a good job of supporting our very rural communities. We've created a chasm there that it's. I come from a town of 1,400 in a very conservative district, and there's a lot of angst about what's next. And this isn't a political ideological statement. It just is what's next. We have a lot of problems, and we need to find out and support what's the best way for us to wander back through that, bring our next generation home, and rebuild our communities, much like my great-grandfather did in the 30s, post-depression, when they started creating cooperatives and gave farmers an opportunity to really exist in the marketplace against the big players. So we're back again. We're back to where we started, and we'll see. For right now, we have 48 of the 50 states that have legalized in some fashion. The two states that are the outliers right now are Idaho and South Dakota. There's rumor that Idaho is going to go legal this year on the hemp side. That will leave South Dakota, but we've in the middle of that we've resolved a lot of the interstate commerce issues. So that if you're a farmer growing in Kentucky and you want to move your raw product, through South Dakota, for example, that is a legal activity. So when I started this 20 years ago, if you told me it was going to take 20 years and here's what it would be today, might have taken pause and said maybe I'll tackle something else. But this has been one of those, there's passions that you really understand. This is a place where I could make a difference with my advocacy and working on this plant, so that I can fix my part of the world. So happy to be able to do that, that really wraps up my talk here. We've got about 6 minutes left, and I'm happy to take. I don't know if there's any time for questions. If there is any, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes, sir. The question is, what is the role of Big Pharma in research and development? Hmm? Two good questions. The role of pharma is a little bit unknown. They were as well, so we didn't have any pushback from them. We know that they are doing research in other countries on this plant, and I would fully expect that we'll see those varieties come back into the United States. I think what's going to the game changer this time with this plant is really what the market wants and needs and what the consumer is demanding. Now with the technology we have, the transparency that's demanded, the consumers mostly want to know, where this is coming from, what's the story, how do they support it. So agricultural cooperatives, whether it's a public benefit corporation or a cooperative or just a group working together, can create the opportunity to tell that story because we have the technology to do that today. I'm bullish long term now, really mostly because of the technology that often was not favorable to us, but I think is going to be favorable to us in the long run. Now on the cannabis side, we had news again today of another large Canadian company imploding. Imploding is maybe not gentle enough word, but its stock has collapsed. There was a lot of money that rushed into the green rush. They thought they were just going to capture markets and then flip it, really. Basically, think of it as often as house flippers. They're going to go out, or people in the oil patch are going to gather up leases and then flip it to a midstream folk. So there was a lot of that went on. A lot of money that poured on. There was a lot of money spent on PR and pizzazz, and it's the chickens are coming home to roost right now. And for those of us who started small, have a good product, kept our eye on the ball, didn't get out in front of our skis, I think we're gonna survive this year, even with the prices like they are, and hopefully we can really help lead the growth of the industry beyond 2020. But we're in for some rough, in part because we're going to be overshadowed by the investment that was going into marijuana. Now is going to sit back on the sidelines. At one point in time, it was really looking at coming into the hemp space on the heels of the good times, but that didn't happen. So 2020 is going to be choppy waters. Yeah. Yes, I'll tell you, and then I'll go back to you.
So I'm currently
Mm-hmm.
More again.
Yeah.
And I raise wine grapes, but I have a friend, a farmer, that raised hemp last year.
Uh-huh.
And I'm kind of taking a wait and see approach.
Yeah.
His seeds, he says he take $1 each
Yeah.
for his seeds, and I'm not sure if he's profited yet, if he was able to sell his crop. But I think he's going after the CBD oil.
He is, and the CBD oil is really what's driven the whole market. And we've had a price compression of about 8x over the last 2 years. So what could have been a $10,000 to $20,000 liter product is now begging for buyers at $1,500. We don't have enough extraction capacity. We got way out in front of the extraction capacity, and then we still have the FDA, who is kind of left the regulations around CBD oil ambiguous. So there was 3 forces that put that together. It wasn't really clarified in the USDA final rules. So we've still got our work cut out for us on the legislative side. So my suggestion to anybody that wants to get into this, number one, don't invest any more money than you're willing to lose. And find good offtake agreements. As you can imagine, the green rush, there's a lot of snake oil salesmen last year, and there was a lot of losses, unfortunately.
He worked hard.
Good. Yeah. I think there's a question back there. Yeah.
So permits and oversight is something free market.
Mm-hmm.
I can bring my product.
Yeah.
But how does that equate to more freedom?
Well, we're getting. I would say it's on the road to freedom. I have literally had senior senators from the Midwest tell me that this is a slippery slope, and if once I give you industrial hemp, you'll next be coming back for heroin for babies. This is really a generational issue, and if you take the generation of my parents out of the equation on Capitol Hill, we could get a lot done. Unfortunately, that generation is ensconced in chairman of judiciary committees and ag committees and work where they have a lot of influence. And in many cases over the last 5 or 6 years, they haven't been friendly to our cause. So we're having to take a bite at a time approach. Now, Ron Paul has been an incredible advocate of ours, as does Rand. They've been promoting the full descheduling to just get government out of it for a long time, which I would support. But we just have this incredible challenge with the inertia and the DEA bureaucracy, what they believe it is, what they've been telling everybody it is, and what we know what it isn't and what it is. So we're gonna, I think we've probably got another 5-year window to clean a lot of this up and get people comfortable with it. But this is really just a generational issue with congressional leaders. No, you don't. No, unfortunately. I mean, we'd like it regulated just like every other crop, because it is just like every other crop. We don't go out and buy a cornfield and say, oh, there's a bourbon field. I think somebody ought to have a permit on that because somebody's going to make bourbon out of that corn. Or same with a potato. They're going to make vodka out of their potato. Well, nobody goes and asks for a permit. Though in those systems, they work on the back side of this, and they go backwards from the processing side to meet the standards, which is where we have to get. But we're still trying to pigeonhole kind of 18th century and 19th century myths and lies into a 21st century policy, and it's not clean, and it's messy, but there's only one way to get through it, and that's just keep pushing. My time is up, so thank you all. Appreciate your time and listening.